Permanent des Affaires étrangères et du Développement international. And we're meeting today pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted on May 25th, 2021, in order to receive a briefing on the current situation in Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. Afin d'assurer une réunion ordonnée, j'encourage, comme toujours,
I would encourage all participants to go on mute when not speaking and to speak to the chair. And I will just raise this piece of paper when you have 30 seconds left.
This from Global Affairs Canada. We have with us this afternoon Troy Lulashnik, Director General, Maghreb, Egypt, Israel, and West Bank and Gaza, and Karen Gardner, Director, Israel, West Bank, and Gaza. Mr. Lulashnik, the floor is yours for your opening remarks of 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm very grateful for this opportunity to speak with you today about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This issue has persisted for decades, and we've all witnessed the tragic consequences of the latest outbreak of violence. There were 253 Palestinians killed in Gaza, 27 in West Bank, along with 13 Israelis killed. As was mentioned by the Prime Minister, and again in our recent speech to the UN General Assembly, this included families, women, and children, and should serve as a stark reminder that we each must collectively do more to prevent the violence and to address the underlying causes. We were horrified by the over 4,100 rockets fired at Israel by Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, both of which are listed terrorist organizations in Canada. And we were appalled by the violence which took place in Jerusalem and throughout the West Bank, a situation that we continue to monitor very closely. We very much welcome the ceasefire and have turned our attention to reinforcing it. We need to have a constructive dialogue between Israelis and Palestinians, supported by concrete projects, in order to get to a place where they can both live in peace and security, with dignity, without fear, and with their human rights fully respected. To this end, as a part of the Prime Minister's announcement last week, there's a specific $5 million allocation for peace building. We're also heavily engaged in addressing the emergency needs in Gaza. Prior to the conflict, we were already very concerned about the humanitarian situation in terms of food, clean water, medicine, and electricity, and sustainable livelihoods. Unfortunately, the situation has worsened significantly. First with COVID and the considerable strain the pandemic placed on the Gazan healthcare system, and then with the aftermath of the 11-day conflict. The UN issued a consolidated appeal in this regard, and in response, the government just announced a contribution of $25 million for humanitarian, development, and peace-building support. $10 million will respond to the UN Consolidated Appeal for immediate humanitarian needs, $10 million focused on recovery and rebuilding over the next 9 months, and then $5 million for the aforementioned projects to inculcate peace, stability, and greater social cohesion among Israelis and Palestinians. These efforts, combined with those of UN agencies on the ground, dedicated NGOs, and the work of other donors, we can strongly support the ceasefire and address the dire humanitarian situation in Gaza. And we're working with partners now to get help to those who need it the most. While critical, these measures only help to address some of the immediate problems. The underlying severe pressures still remain, and we must work towards a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in the Middle East, including the creation of a Palestinian state living side by side in peace and security with Israel. This is profoundly difficult. We fully recognize and strongly support Israel's right to assure its own security, and this comes with a significant responsibility to act in accordance with human rights and international humanitarian law. We remain very concerned about settlements, evictions, and demolitions, which are a violation of the Fourth Geneva Convention and serious obstacles to peace. We're particularly worried about the current cases in Sheikh Jarrah and so on. Moreover, all of the final status issues, borders, Jerusalem, refugees, security recognition, need to be addressed. We support direct negotiations between the parties so that these complex issues can be resolved through dialogue. This is our best path forward. Negotiations, supplemented by urgent concrete support on the ground to reinforce hope and build a more peaceful future for all Israelis and Palestinians. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lelashnik, for your opening remarks and for being with us this afternoon. We will go to round one of our interventions. They consist of 6-minute segments, and leading us off this afternoon will be Mr. Chung. Please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to our witnesses for appearing to brief us on the situation. I noted that the government during the recent conflict highlighted the rocket attacks on Israel that were coming from the Gaza Strip, and also indicated, and I also noted that in the government statement, it indicated and called on foreign entities which support Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad to end their material and financial support for these groups. What foreign entities, I'm assuming that the foreign entity that the government is referring to is the Islamic Republic of Iran. Is that correct?
Thanks very much for the question. Obviously, we have great concerns about Iran as a state sponsor of terrorism, and indeed Iran's behavior throughout the region. So in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, and indeed in Gaza. And that is a serious concern for this conflict and for the broader regional peace and security. So we are quite concerned about external support that Hamas in particular receives as it continues to fuel this conflict.
Thank you for that answer. As you pointed out in your opening remarks, Hamas and Islamic Jihad are terrorist entities listed under the Criminal Code of Canada. I'm interested in finding out from you what material support they are getting. The government obviously has indicated they're getting financial support, but what kind of material support are they getting from Iran? Is Iran supplying ready-built rockets, or the raw materials for those rockets? Is it supplying personnel? What exactly is the material? What exactly does the material support consist of?
Thanks very much. So we know that Hamas has been controlling Gaza now for well over a decade, and it has maintained its control and been able to function because of the flow of money, because of the flow of material support, and that can include weapons into Gaza. And so we are concerned about all of those things that you mentioned. I just draw the chair's attention to the recent past a few years ago, where a number of tunnels were discovered in Egypt along the Rafah area along the border. And we learned of material support and all manner of items being smuggled in through well-established tunnels. So goods and money going into Gaza and supporting Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad is profoundly concerning and continues to be a significant concern for us and indeed for the Israelis. It is also one of the reasons why it is difficult to get assistance into Gaza, so that it has to be done in a way that does not in any way contribute to the capabilities of Hamas. Thank you.
The government, Iran obviously is a big player in this conflict. The Prime Minister indicated in 2015 that the government of Canada intended, as head of government, to reopen Canada's embassy in Tehran. Can you tell us if that is still the case?
So thanks very much. My colleagues deal with Iran and the overall relationship, so I can commend them to respond in due course. I would say that our bilateral interaction with Iran is very, very limited, and as you know, we express a whole series of concerns associated with Iran related to the human rights record, and we are the annual sponsor of the resolution at the UN. Very serious concerns about their weapons programs, ballistic missile programs, and as mentioned before, significant concern about the role that Iran is playing.
Thank you. One quick final question before my time's out. We know that the big counter to Iran in the region is the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. The government of Canada has indicated previously that it welcomed the Abraham Accords. What impact will the recent Gaza conflict have on the status of the Abraham Accords and their potential extension to other states in the region?
Yeah, thanks very much. I think these normalization agreements are indicative of changing attitudes in the region, and we see growing ties between Israel and a number of countries, UAE, Morocco, even Saudi Arabia. The interactions have increased, and I think this is a very, very positive thing and something that we have welcomed, that collectively there is a joint concern about terrorism and about Iranian intentions in the region. So I think we would welcome, and we do welcome, the normalization agreements and hope that this can build foundations for a more peaceful circumstance, a more peaceful environment, and we'd like to support them where we can. I think in terms of the recent conflict, of course, what we'll talk about today is that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is really a core issue for a number of countries in the region, and so this is difficult when you're having countries build ties together. But hopefully we can, with the ceasefire, reinforce it and move to a more positive environment. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Mr. Chung. We now go to Ms. Sachs, please, for 6 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for our officials for being here and the hard work that you do on behalf of Canadians and making yourself available to the committee today. I'll start with this. I am an Israeli Canadian citizen, and I lived in Israel during the Second Intifada and have been witness to and unfortunately present at terrorist bombings. And it's an indescribable and awful experience that it's hard for Canadians to relate to from here. During the recent conflict, I had families huddling in bomb shelters, and I know the stress of worrying for their safety. And I wanted to ask, is everyone from Canada's mission staff in Israel all right? And is their mental health okay, and is support available to them during this time?
Thanks very much. And I think, Mr. Chair, as it was just described, this is very similar to the sentiment and feelings from our hardworking embassy staff, locally engaged staff, and families. And so with 4,100 rockets being fired towards Israel, there was not a lot of time to race to the bomb shelters, and it's very frightening, and certainly the psychosocial component is very significant. I'd also say psychosocial needs in Gaza and throughout the region is also very significant. And so what this portends and suggests to all of us is that we need to get to a better place. We need to sit down and slowly build something so that we can step away from the violence and the conflict and move to a better future.
Absolutely. Thank you. Unfortunately, at this time, it's with Hamas in a leadership role in Gaza and its absolute control in the planning and coordination of military activities there. Life in Gaza for Palestinians is difficult and challenging, and the military wing is really not distinct from the civilian leadership on the ground. From my understanding, women and LGBTQ and religious minorities face discrimination and treatment, and as well as political dissidents. In light of that persecution and other things that we've heard on the ground there, my question is that dealing with humanitarian on the ground in Gaza is challenging. How would you respond to that?
Thanks very much. Absolutely, the situation in Gaza before the 11-day conflict was almost unlivable, as the UN would say. Lack of water, medicine, healthcare, unemployment is skyrocketed. Economy is nearly collapsed. It is a very, very difficult environment to live, and then it has been exacerbated by by COVID and then by this conflict. And as was mentioned, Hamas is controlling the place. We have no interaction with Hamas as a listed terrorist organization. And the real challenge for everyone, for all donors, is to get the assistance to the people that need it. And there are large numbers of vulnerable people, and in a way that doesn't benefit Hamas, and it is profoundly difficult to do that. And it can only be done through extensive measures, working with our trusted partners, our humanitarian organizations with experience on the ground to get the help where it is needed most. So we can do it, but it is certainly made more difficult by Hamas's control.
Absolutely. And just on that note, since 2014, Hamas has been holding the bodies of Israeli soldiers Hadar Goldin and Oren Shaul. And since 2014, Hamas has also been holding Avera Mengistu, an Israeli civilian prisoner, as well as an Israeli Bedouin civilian, Hisham al-Sayed, since 2015. Are there any indications, especially now with the ceasefire discussions that are going on, that after nearly 7 years that Hamas is willing to return the remains of Goldin and Shaul to their families for burial, or release the additional hostages?
Thank you. I'm certainly very, very well aware of the issue. I have met with the Goldin family personally, and I have made a number of efforts to try to encourage the Palestinian Authority to exercise influence, to have the remains returned. And I know that as a part of the post-conflict environment, Israel has really pushed the issue to say this is wholly unacceptable and it must be addressed. And so right now, this is a very live issue, and it's something that the Israelis are hoping to resolve quickly.
It certainly would be in the efforts of moving towards peace building. And on that note, I personally am very pleased about the peace building funding that has been put into the $25 million that the Canadian government has allocated. As I worked on people-to-people initiatives, including some CETA-funded ones in the early 1990s of the Oslo Accords, they're essential for building the foundations for peace for both Israelis and Palestinians in the region. Could you possibly provide more information on why this funding is so important and what kind of initiatives Canada will be supporting, perhaps a little bit more than what you mentioned in your opening remarks?
Thanks very much. And I absolutely agree that peace building is fundamental to getting to a different place. What was so alarming about the crisis, there were many, many things, but one of them is you had violence in Jerusalem, you had violence throughout the West Bank, and really the issues of social cohesion and getting to a place where you can even envisage two peoples living together side by side in peace and security, and we're a long way from that. And so we really need to build within communities a feeling of harmony and acceptance. And so that's what we endeavor to do with our partners and with this approach. We have, as was mentioned, Mr. Chair, been doing a little bit of peace building and working with NGOs. bringing the disparate groups together to try to make a difference. And we will continue that practice, and I think amplify it in a number of key ways. Having groups come together, discuss openly the issues, the frictions, the challenges, and finding a way forward for that harmony. Thanks.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Sachs. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sachs. Thank you, Mr. Lukershtik. Mr. Bergeron, once again for 6 minutes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank Mr. Lunachnik and the other witness as well. So if we cannot find lasting peace in the region, and I would like to point out that the reaching of the peace agreement with a number of Arab countries is very positive news. But we need to be clear here. Those are just a recognition of the normalization of a situation that has existed in the country. And through these peace agreements. But the last clashes have shown that as long as there is no true peace agreement between Israel and Palestine, then we will be on a permanent war footing. And to say what is usually said, peace in the current circumstances in Israel and Palestine is simply an absence of war, because there are always clashes, and every time this happens, it is experienced here as something that is extremely painful. So I have difficulty imagining how horrific it must be for the Israelis and the Palestinians who are living this on the ground. And therefore, I hope for the reaching of a lasting agreement between these two peoples as quickly as possible so that we can put an end to this permanent war footing that exists in the region. Now, to this, Mr. Chair, might we be able to think of is there a certain political instability that reigns on both sides? Might we think that this might harm the resumption of negotiations between the two parties?
Thanks very much. I very much agree that we can only have this just and lasting peace. This is a nice phrase, but in practice, what does it mean and how do you get there? And just as was mentioned, Mr. Chair, this is the latest exacerbation and conflict, but this has been persisting for many, many years and decades, and it is painful for everyone. And what we need to do is obviously deal with the most urgent humanitarian needs, medicine, life-saving interventions instantly, but then we need to rebuild the foundations to get to that place where we can not have these conflicts take place at all. And the only way you do that is you deal with the underlying causes and frustrations that happen. And I agree as well that the challenges, if you look at the most recent conflict, we had some immediate causes like marches, you had in and around Al-Aqsa, you had violence, but underlying that, you had the Palestinian Authority cancel elections, and they haven't had elections in the territories for 15 years. And everyone was registering to vote, excited. It's a young generation. They wanted to exercise their democratic rights, and the elections were canceled. So there was already considerable frustration on the ground there in situ. And also, I'd say on the Israeli side, they're still in the process of coalition formation. after 4 elections in the last couple of years. So it is a very difficult political environment in the region, and it's hard to sort of build a framework, a foundation without that more political, stable environment.
Merci, ça répond tout à fait à ma question.
Thank you. That answers my question. I'd like to come back to the matter of elections in Palestine. I was surprised to see the government of Canada speak out publicly and to sort of lecture the Palestinian Authority to suspend elections. Now, I have two concerns. The first is the situation in Jerusalem East. As you know, Israel is forbidding the Palestinian population of Jerusalem East to participate in the elections, and neither can they participate in the elections on the Israeli side. And that was one of the reasons brought up by the Palestinian authorities to suspend the election. My other concern is the situation of vaccination, the vaccination status on the Palestinian side, which is barely underway, and therefore the population, the people are subject to this very virulent pandemic. Is there, how can we understand the reasons that have led to the Palestinian Authority to suspend the election? Isn't that a good reason?
Thank you very much. Indeed, the Palestinians indicated that the reason for cancellation was they didn't think it would be possible to have voting take place in East Jerusalem. Although I don't think at the end of the day that was ultimately decided. And there's also the other factors which within the negotiations between Fatah and Hamas in the lead up to the elections, they tried to reach an agreement and have a unified Palestinian government, and those negotiations were unsuccessful ultimately. And furthermore, within Fatah, there were a lot of different political ambitions and machinations, which made it very, very difficult to have that have an outcome that would bring that stability that I think the PA and president wanted. So very much it was difficult for a variety of reasons. And on COVID, I agree. I think this is another challenge. The combating of COVID and vaccinations remains slow in West Bank and Gaza. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Merci, Monsieur Bergeron.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bergeron.
We'll now go to the final questioner in this round. That's Mr. Harris for 6 minutes. And just check your mic there, Mr. Harris.
Yep.
Perfect.
How's that? Is that okay? Okay, thank you very much. And thank you, sir, for joining us and all of the witnesses. First of all, let me say, at the outset that we all abhor the deaths that have taken place in recent days, the 293 deaths on both sides, 280 of which were Palestinians and 13 Israeli citizens lost their lives, and that's to be condemned. This type of violence and death is to be abhorred. I do want to move to some of the structural issues and problems that gave rise to this circumstance, and also talk about Canada's role in all this, and in sense of our own foreign policy. And I want to start by raising the concern that has been raised by Canada, failing to continue to support United Nations resolutions which are condemnatory of the illegal occupation of the Palestinian territories for some decades now. And I want to suggest that Canada ought to change its policy, but also underscore the fact that the fact that Canada stands ready, as the minister said recently, to assist when negotiations have been achieved, is in fact providing an incentive to the status quo. And if I may, I want to quote from an individual by the name of Daniel Levy, a former negotiator with the Israeli government in the peace talks, suggesting that other roads should be taken. He said the collective is talking to the UN Security Council about a year ago after the annexation proposals were dropped or at least stalled. He says that this was not a cause for self-congratulation. There's no reward for the avoidance of criminality, he said. He went on to say that the concern that he talked about the peace process as currently framed was a deeper structural problem. As it was currently framed and pursued, it's a place of refuge from hard choices, a comfort zone where the law of diminishing returns has a lockhold and has brought us to the brink of annexation and the precipice of a Palestinian Authority financial collapse. And he said it's not a question of resuming negotiations. More of the same guarantees further deterioration, a failure of learning, politics, and imagination. And so what he talked about, and there's been some talk about creating the conditions, the building blocks for future progress that can deliver equality, dignity, and security for Palestinians and Israelis. And I think that's what we all want. But he also suggests that there needs to be accountability for human rights and international law by in the case, of course, that we're dealing with the allegations against Israel. And he says, if the unlawful and peace-negating policies of Israel continue to be met with impunity, then there should be no expectation of positive change. It's that simple. Israel pursues policies in violation of international law and UN resolutions because it can. And he suggests that human rights and international legality should be our guiding star and no longer subordinated to maintaining a peace process that has so palpably failed to deliver. Now, I'd like you to comment on that, sir, in respect of Canada's position, which used to be strongly supportive of UN resolutions seeking to ensure that it was recognized that the occupations were illegal and looking for some change. Why did Canada stop supporting those resolutions? And doesn't he agree that the impunity of Israel with respect to these occupations as in fact incentivizing a lack of progress in the peace talks?
Thanks very much for the comments and questions. I'd say on the UN resolutions, we have been voting pretty much in the same way for indeed a number of years, and that is predicated on the view that there are far too many one-sided resolutions that unfairly single out Israel. And each year at the United Nations, you will have 19 to 23 resolutions, depending upon the year, all of which make all kinds of commentary on Israeli behavior, but there's no discussion of other players in those resolutions for the most part. And so I think that's one of the reasons why we have voted fairly consistently. I would note that we did have a vote change on the self-determination resolution that took place in 2018 to send a message that we very strongly support the two-state solution and a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace. And so that's on voting. On the negotiations of a broader Middle East peace, I think Canada has been very active for many years on this. Very active in the past several years as well. We had the former U.S. administration put a lot of effort into it with U.S. President Trump's so-called deal of the century. We went to an economic part of their plan to see where it was headed. But one of the key problems with that plan is that it fell far below the international consensus and all the red lines related to the final status issues. And so there have been efforts for encouraging Middle East peace. They've just been, fairly unsuccessful and unrealistic. And so I think moving forward, we really need to work together collectively to prevent these kinds of conflicts from occurring, and we will do our part. We are very significant in supporting the diplomatic part of that piece, the humanitarian and development part of that piece. And we very, very regularly work with our colleagues in the US, the new US administration, with the UK, the EU, and with our partners in the region to try to get it on track. Thank you.
Thanks very much. We'll have to leave it there. We'll now go to round two, and leading us off is Mr. Morantz with 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much for the information that you've given so far. And I also want to thank you just for pointing out that when it comes to UN resolutions, Israel is unfairly singled out compared to human rights issues with many other nations. So I appreciate that you're making that point. It's a kind of a complicated situation when it comes though to the aid that we're providing. I know the government's announced $25 million. We're providing aid into a region, and we all know we need to help Palestinian citizens in the aftermath of this latest conflict. But we're dealing with a region that is controlled, as you said, by a terrorist organization that has not had an election for 17 years. And so how does Canada make sure that the aid that goes into the region isn't falling into the hands of the wrong people, isn't winding up somehow with Hamas to build more rockets rather than getting to the Palestinian people who so desperately need this assistance?
Thanks very much. And indeed, this is a significant concern for us and for all partners who do work in this area. And the answer is we put in place very significant controls on all of our projects that go into the region, and in particular in Gaza, but in West Bank as well. We have what is called an enhanced due diligence system that we apply to our funding, and that has a whole series of measures. So there are anti-terrorism lists, and based on our funding agreements, we use those lists. We work with our partners, and in a previous capacity, I was our representative on the Global Counterterrorism Forum, so I know a little bit about this kind of part. Okay. And then we supplement those sort of lists and assessments with practical program implementation measures like screening, oversight, partners, site visits, verification. So we have teams in Ramallah that will go in to Gaza and make sure the money goes to where it is needed. We also rely on trusted UN partners.
I really appreciate the answer. Just limited time, of course. Would you be able to table that list of aid recipients with the committee?
Mr. Chair, I'm happy to provide in writing a list of the recipients for our first tranche of addressing the emergency appeals in the Gaza, the 10 million. Thanks.
Okay, for the 25 million, correct?
Thanks. I would say for the first 10 million, this is an emergency intervention in response to the appeals, and that those recipients are known. Okay. For the other portions, they're still being worked out.
Okay. All right. So the extent that you know them. Now, I want to ask a question. It came to light last fall that anti-Semitic materials were being distributed through UNRWA to Palestinian students in Palestinian schools. At the time, I was encouraged when Minister Gould issued a statement saying that she's instructed Canadian officials to investigate the presence in school materials in the West Bank and Gaza of references that violate UN values of human rights. I did an OPQ question, and the response that I got didn't mention anything about an investigation. I asked what the status of the investigation was, who were the Canadian officials that were involved in this investigation, and there was simply no information with respect to that. And I'm wondering if you could maybe they left it out, and you could enlighten us as to what the nature of the investigation and its status is.
Thanks very much. Indeed, we were very concerned about the problematic educational materials that were that were sent out, and we expect UNRWA to uphold UN values and principles. Minister Gould immediately called the Commissioner General of UNRWA, and then has subsequently spoken with a large number of her counterparts to discuss this issue. And she indeed asked officials to investigate what happened and what measures are being taken to rectify and remedy the situation, and what will be done going forward. And so, I'm pleased to indicate that we indeed have very diligently been working with UNRWA, with the CG, with
Will
the
a report
UNRWA's
be issued on the investigation?
Mr. Marantz, I'm sorry. We'll have to leave it there. You'll have a chance perhaps to go and follow up in a second round. We'll give the floor now to Ms. Sahota, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Oh, just 5. So I appreciate both the witnesses being here today and your experience and depth of knowledge. I have a few questions to get through. Canadians have been watching this very closely unfold, and many have been horrified at the human rights violations that they have seen. I want to understand better, as people have been digging into it, and then more and more my constituents have been asking me questions about Canada's role in this, but also Canada's view as to the viability of the two-state solution. Given the fact that you look at the map currently there, and it's like a whole bunch of puzzle pieces, there's been more and more expansion of settlements and forced evictions that have been happening into the Palestinian territory. What effect does that have and on the viability of the fact that Canada believes in a two-state solution? Do we then mean, if we do not recognize the annexation of East Jerusalem and other territories in Gaza, do we believe that Israel would have to cede that area? What are our thoughts on that?
Thanks very much. Yeah, very good question. There are those who will say that the two-state solution is a dream that wasn't realized, and a number of Palestinians have lost faith in the prospect of it. Certainly, what has been happening on the ground with settlements, with evictions, and with demolitions, it has made it much more difficult to come to ground and to work towards a two-state solution. But if you take a step back and consider, if the ultimate goal is that Israelis and Palestinians can live together in a secure environment, this is the path, and the only way we're going to get there is if we sit down and investigate. And in terms of the land, the borders, those are issues that need to be worked out in the ultimate negotiation, so that we can get to a place where you have a viable Palestinian state. They both want to be secure. Neither side is going anywhere. So we need to work towards a two-state solution.
So if we are acknowledging the inherent illegality of the current land ownership, what do you think Canada's role can be in helping make sure that each have, clear, if we're working towards a two-state solution, have clear borders that are defined? What can we do to help that happen?
Thank you. So on settlements and the sort of changing of geography on the ground, we have been very, very strong and vocal that settlements, evictions, demolitions are illegal, contrary to the Fourth Geneva Convention, and must stop. And so we have articulated this to our partners, to our Israeli friends, publicly many times, and as have other partners as well. So what I think we need to do collectively is partners need to talk about getting the right conditions in place to move us closer to that two-state solution, and that includes stopping the evictions and settlements that are happening now.
Can you help me better understand why 138 countries that are a part of the UN have recognized Palestine as a state, but we have not yet? Can you explain to me a little bit more as to why Canada has taken that stance?
Thank you. What I would say is we believe in the creation of a Palestinian state, but you can't just announce it. We need to collectively work together and get the circumstances so that there is a contiguous, viable, sovereign Palestinian state that works and functions. And unilateral declarations or actions within that try to prejudge those negotiations that are the only way forward are problematic and obstacles to getting to where we need to be.
Can I quickly try to squeeze in, and maybe you can even answer it later on if I run out of time. The normalization between of diplomatic relations with Arab states and Israel, as we've seen over the years. I mean, Egypt was always there, but now we've seen increased relations with other states like the UAE. Has that had an impact in the current Israeli-Palestinian relations?
Just a very brief answer, please, Mr. Ludashnik.
Yeah, I would say I think it's had a positive regional relationship. And the Palestinians, they are concerned that this was a negotiation coin where there wouldn't be normalization until more work was done on the Palestinian issues. So they are worried about it, but ultimately it's a positive thing, brings stability. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We'll have to leave it there. Merci beaucoup. Je passe maintenant la parole à...
Thank you very much. I would now like to go to Mr. Bergeron. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very quickly, I'd like to come back to the fact that Canada still has not recognized the Palestinian state, supposedly because we don't know it's not a viable state. However, I must say that Israel, for many, many years, is trying to do everything it can, or seems to be trying to do everything it can to ensure that the Palestinian state is not viable. And I know because I visited after another clash between the two peoples. I saw that Israel is surgically targeting infrastructure in the Palestinian state, whether it be police stations, ports, the airport, and so everything is being done to break down the Palestinian state. So I'm simply wondering if Canada is not part of the problem by refusing to recognize Palestine. Regardless of that, I'd like to come back to the Palestinian elections and to the COVID-19 pandemic. Considering that Israel is among the states where the vaccination rate is among the highest in the world, and that Palestine is perhaps the opposite, don't you think that as an occupying power, Israel has a responsibility to the Palestinian people, the people under its occupation, to contribute to vaccinating the Palestinians?
Thanks very much for that. Certainly on the vaccination question, we are quite concerned about the current state of affairs in West Bank and Gaza. We have been discussing with our partners, with donors, and with the Palestinians the plan for vaccination in both those areas. And I've been told by the Palestinians that they are receiving doses from COVAX, and they have received and are receiving more vaccinations from other countries, partners, and donors. So this is certainly getting Palestinians vaccinated is a key priority for all of the donor community, and it's part and parcel to the work that we're doing collectively to help Gazans and to help Palestinians, because you can provide the medicine and food, but if COVID is still rampant, you're fighting a losing
Je suis
battle.
tout à fait d'accord, mais comme je commence à manquer.
I agree, but I'm running out of time, so I'm going to ask you, do you think that Israel has a responsibility as an occupying power to provide these vaccines, given the fact that the vaccination is practically done in Israel? Do they have the obligation to provide that vaccine to the Palestinians? Very briefly.
Yeah, so I know Israel was asked that very question, and they indicated that they do not feel that they have a responsibility to vaccinate the Palestinians, and that other measures for the Palestinians were taken. But Israel did indeed facilitate the movement of vaccines through Israel and into the Palestinian territories.
Merci beaucoup. Merci, Monsieur Bergeron.
Thank you, Mr. Bergeron.
Give the floor to Mr. Harris again for 2.5 minutes, please. Mr. Harris, the floor is yours.
Thank you, the chair, and thank you to the witness again. You referenced the illegality of the Canadian condemning settlements, evictions, and demolitions as illegal. You didn't mention the occupation as such, and clearly this is the we've got a situation where as long as this goes on, or the longer that this goes on, we're seeing the permanent denial in case of freedom, rights, and equality to Palestinians on a longer basis. And clearly something has to be done to stop that. While you might vote against a resolution because you don't like the preamble, can Canada not be stating it regards this occupation as illegal and look for an end to it?
Thanks very much. And I would say certainly Canada's policy is longstanding that we do not recognize permanent Israeli control over the territories from the 1967 conflict. That includes East Jerusalem, Gaza, Golan Heights, and the West Bank. And this is what makes the settlements illegal, contrary to the Fourth Geneva Convention, that the Israelis are building in those territories. So I very much agree, Mr. Speaker, that we need to work on the two-state solution step by step so that we can improve the lives of all in the region. Thanks.
And why then, sir, where there are allegations of human rights violations, both against Hamas and Israeli soldiers, why does the government of Canada prevent serious investigations into these human rights, including at the ICC?
Thanks very much. I would say, with respect to the International Criminal Court, our position is very clear and has been stated many times in 2015, 2018, 2020, that right as soon as the Palestinians sought to accede to the Rome Statute, the ICC, Canada indicated that it does not support Palestinian accession to the Rome Statute as a state.
And but you didn't argue that case before the ICC when you had an opportunity to do so. Canada did, not you, of course.
Thank you. The same rationale for not supporting unilateral actions that prejudge the outcome, like accessions, and the Palestinians have sought to accede to dozens. In fact, they mentioned probably 300 instruments, treaties,
Isn't that preventing Palestine from becoming a state? This is the element of international cooperation and acceding to international norms. We urge that on all sorts of states that we don't, or entities that we don't aren't happy with. Surely, acceding to statehood expects responses from them as individuals and as a government as well. So this is something that is positive in nature, is it not? Instead of exclusive, it should be not a force for positive instead of exclusion.
Mr. Harris, that's your time. We'll need if we can get a very quick answer from Mr. Lashnik, that would be great. And then we'll go on to the next speaker, please.
Thanks very much, and appreciate the comment. I just say a number of these efforts for accession are driven to send a message, and it's not really about the Palestinians wanting to participate in the Chemical Weapons Convention, for example. It's to make a political point. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next up is Mr. Genuis, please, for 5 minutes. Go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just wanted to start by making a comment about the issue of Palestinian elections that's been brought up. I believe very much that Palestinian self-determination involves Palestinians choosing their own representatives. And the implications of what some have been saying that you can't have elections unless there are ideal conditions in terms of voting in all parts of claimed territory. But if that were in practice in general, then there would be no elections happening in Ireland and Cyprus and many other places. In fact, the Central Tibetan Administration just held elections, even though Tibet remains fully under CCP occupation, and the CTA doesn't have any official access to Tibet whatsoever. So I would just submit that if the CTA can hold elections, the Palestinian Authority can hold elections, and nations of people seeking independence should begin the process of nation building without delay, and effective nation building requires democratic elections. So to our witnesses, I'm very concerned about the political, human rights, and humanitarian situation in Gaza. So I want to ask a few questions that relate to that. During the conflict, Al Jazeera reported that an important humanitarian corridor, the Kerem Shalom border crossing, was subject to a mortar attack by Hamas and was shut down for a period of time. And this obviously had significant negative impacts in terms of the ability to get humanitarian supplies into Gaza. Can you confirm whether this humanitarian corridor was indeed attacked by Hamas? And do you have any sense of why Hamas would have attacked a humanitarian corridor like this?
Thanks very much, and I hesitate to be a confirmation, but what I can say is that I heard from our partners that incidents, including this one, have occurred, and that humanitarian actors and supplies were either targeted or prevented from entering. And, in terms of the reason, again, it's hard for me to speculate, but obviously the attention and the pressure on all parties, Hamas may not have wanted it alleviated instantly to keep the pressure on and keep sending the message. One of the reasons specified for their frustration were the cancellation of elections, where they hoped to do well, and so they were very, very frustrated with the overall situation with the Palestinian Authority, and so the result was the significant conflict. And and Hamas, I think, at least in this time frame, became more popular among some Palestinians for being a defender.
Mm-hmm. It's just horrifying that Hamas would attack a vital humanitarian crossing like that, and I think it's testimony that's important for people to hear. And I would maybe just want to clarify that the importance of having democratic elections take place where they can take place in the West Bank involves a system whereby whoever wins that election isn't able to take complete control through an armed takeover. That's essentially what happened in Gaza previously, is that Hamas, after winning one election, made sure there were no subsequent elections taking place. According to the Israeli military, of the 4,340 rockets fired by Hamas, close to 700 of them landed in the Gaza Strip, destroying infrastructure, injuring hundreds, killing dozens. Does Canada have estimates about how many Hamas rockets landed in Gaza and the impact of these rockets on Palestinian civilians?
Thank you. I would say I don't want to give precise statistics, but I can say that the numbers that we have heard are very similar to those that were just quoted, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Matthias Schmale, UNRWA's director in Gaza, described Israel's attacks as precise and sophisticated. After making these comments, he was recalled from his post, and Hamas effectively demanded that he be fired. What does this say about UNRWA's ability to operate in any way independently, and also, just to follow up on Mr. Moran's comments, will there be any public reporting on this alleged investigation being done by the Minister of International Development with respect to UNRWA?
Thanks very much. We are, learning about the issue related to the UNRWA director in Gaza, and so we're looking into that now. To me, it indicates the sort of extreme tension that takes place in Gaza, where you have an organization trying to represent the UN, support the people, and their values and interests are often extremely different from Hamas, a listed terrorist organization, and other groups in Gaza. So the tension is always there, but this is certainly another indication of that taking place. On the issue of the educational materials, as mentioned, we have had a series of meetings and discussions. There have been a number of measures put in place, including the launch of a digital learning platform that has a vetting procedure that is 3 steps, where education materials, before they're posted online, are evaluated in terms of neutrality and appropriateness. So that is in place now. But those neutrality discussions, which Canada funds through its programming, are ongoing, and so we're having meetings every couple of weeks.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks very much, Mr. Genuis. Mr. Oliphant, please go ahead for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just want to check the microphone because I've moved it around a few times. Am I still good? Good. Thank you, Director General, for your time with us again. Just because we were on the elections issue, is it fair to say that Canada has done 2 things? We've called upon the Palestinian Authority to have elections as soon as possible, and we've called on Israel to ensure that all who voted the last time could vote this time. Would that be fair?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. We very much think that the Palestinians are long overdue. The Palestinian people deserve to exercise their democratic rights, and we have raised with the Israelis on numerous occasions to help make this happen.
So I bring that up as an example of one of the ways in which Canada is attempting to be helpful and also strong on both sides. And I think just because it was raised from a number of members of the committee, I wanted to stress that this is an example. Getting off elections for a moment, and I know that you bring a particular expertise, having been our ambassador in Egypt. I wanted to talk a little bit about the role of Egypt in the negotiation of the ceasefire, as well as in this ongoing peace building moment that we are in, and Canada's potential or possible support for Egypt and how we could play a role, or if we should play a role, in your opinion?
Thanks very much. Yes, I would say Egypt played a critical role in helping bring about this ceasefire. Extensive conversations, negotiations with the Israelis and with Hamas and others, and so they, I think, they really carried the weight of this burden in this latest conflict. We had a team that went into Gaza just a couple of days ago, and you could see Egyptian flags and pictures of President Sisi in a number of places. So I think the Gazans really appreciated his President Sisi's direct intervention. So, and the Egyptians have done this a number of times over the past few years as the conflicts have increased, and they're certainly an important player for how we can engage to sort of build that peace in that relationship. Jordan's another key player. The two that have had peace treaties with Israel for some time. So we are talking with the Egyptians, and our foreign minister has had recent discussions with his Egyptian counterpart. So absolutely, Egypt is one of a key partner in the region, and one that will continue to engage.
Back to the topic of elections, in your briefings you've had from our missions, what is your sense of what will happen with the election, the coalition building that's happening in Israel now? And do you think that we are into a period of instability or stability, and how might this affect the possibility of the ceasefire holding?
Thanks very much. I think, I try not to be overly optimistic, but I would say the ceasefire, as long as we can reinforce it with emergency intervention, it hopefully will hold and will continue on this path. I think at the end of the day, none of them want to see more of the tragic consequences that we experienced. And so I think that's positive. The domestic political situation in Israel has been chaotic and very, very difficult for a number of years, with 4 elections. I think Prime Minister Netanyahu has been successful up to this point in maintaining his role, but just recently we have what they call an anti-Netanyahu coalition that has indicated to President Rivlin that they can form a government. So we'll see what happens with the vote in a couple of weeks to see whether there is a different coalition in place. There are those who would say any kind of actual coalition is a stabilizing factor and they just want to get on with it. There are those who express concerns about the direction of the coalition. In Israeli society, we see a very strong support of Israel and support of settlements and settlers, and so building that space between Palestinians and Israelis. There's concern about how successful we're going to be in the near term, but I think we continue to work very closely with our Israeli friends. We continue to work with our allies and partners, and with the Palestinians, because there is only the path of prosperity and stability, because that's what everyone wants.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alphen. Yes, that's your time. If you have a very brief question, might be able to slide in. But
the brief question would be with respect to the ICC. Canada was strong on saying that under the Statute of Rome, we didn't believe that Palestinians had a recourse there. However, I believe we've also said we respect the independence of the prosecutor and the court itself, and we'll watch that unfold. Is that fair as well?
Yeah, reviewing, watching carefully the investigation, and very strongly support the ICC. This is the cornerstone of the rules-based international order that we need. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Alphen, thank you, colleagues. That will take us to the end of our scheduled time with our witnesses this afternoon. En notre nom collectif, j'aimerais remercier nos.
In closing, I'd like to thank our witnesses for their testimony and for their expertise, and especially for their service.
Your testimony this afternoon was very beneficial to the committee. Thank you, Mr. Lulashnik and Ms. Garner. Colleagues, with that, I have a brief point of business. We'll let our witnesses disconnect at their discretion. We have coming to us tonight or tomorrow the draft report on arms exports, and we will begin consideration of that report on Tuesday. And I'm wondering if members would agree to revert to our previous practice of having suggested amendments be distributed in writing beforehand. I think it worked quite well last time. And if that's agreeable, I would suggest Monday to the clerk if it's in one language only, or Tuesday by noon if you have amendments bilingual. It's not a hard requirement in the sense that colleagues should be free to introduce amendments or suggestions from the floor. It just made our work easier in the COVID report, and with respect to the sessions that we have on arms exports, it may be efficient to do it that way. Is there agreement if you have amendments, to circulate them Monday in one language, Tuesday by noon if you have them in both? Any opposition to that?
That doesn't take away from the opportunity to bring them.
No, not at all. Not at all. It's simply an efficiency mechanism. If you have substantial amendments, it might make it a little easier for colleagues to be able to respond to them and make our work a bit more efficient in the coming sessions. Okay, colleagues, thank you very much. I know we're not at the full 2 hours today because of the hard work that we did in the previous session that bought us some extra time, but we can turn our thoughts to arms exports during that hour already. And I thank you for your cooperation and excellent testimony this afternoon on a very complex issue. So with that,
Monsieur le Président.
Oui, Monsieur Bergeron.
Mr. Chair, I just have a question for clarification. I understand that we're about to end our meeting, but couldn't we have continued our exchange with the officials on the Israel-Palestinian conflict?
And as per their availability, we had them for an hour, and we chose to respect that.
Mr. Chair, we can't hear you in the room. I don't know if that's you or just the room.
Okay, I'm testing.
Oh, can hear you now. Yeah, we're resolved.
Okay. We did have a witness who was tentatively slated for the second hour, and that witness was unavailable. As a result, that hour opened up. But we had already confirmed with officials that they would make themselves available only for the 1 hour briefing. So just to be respectful of the timeline and the notice of meeting as circulated, with your agreement, we would leave it there. The committee, of course, is free to revisit the issue as it chooses going forward, and I think all members will have an interest in remaining seized of the substance.
Je veux simplement exprimer.
I would just like to say I'm disappointed. Of course, no one is responsible for this, but we had the opportunity among ourselves to see how few meetings we have before the summer adjournment, and therefore it's unfortunate that we're losing an hour of the very little time that we have. I agree.
But I'm sure members can put that extra hour to good use with respect to thinking ahead to our work on arms exports, on which I'm sure there'll be some discussion. Not perfect, but I think in light of the circumstances, the best outcome we could achieve collectively on this, with the will of the committee being what it was expressed in the subcommittee report. And
with that, I'd like to thank you all. Stay in good health. Thank you for your cooperation.
Tuesday. Merci.